welcome to A Drummer's Guide to, the podcast about what it takes to be a professional musician, aside from the actual playing of your musical instrument. My name's Emily Dolan Davis, and today I'm gonna talk about how to get more stuff done. So it's often a conversation that I have with people where they ask me how I manage to do so many things all at once. For those that don't know, there are many facets to what I consider my job as a professional musician. So obviously I go out touring, which is a whole thing. I also have my remote recording studio, which you can see behind me if you're watching on YouTube. I also do one-on-one coaching with people. I've created a course for remote recording just to help people with the business side of that. And then I'm also really active on social media. Obviously, I do this podcast, which I've picked up recently again, and I'm enjoying it more than I can tell you. But I just wanted to sort of let you in under the hood about why I'm able to do all these things. And I've got to tell you, like, I'm not anyone special, honestly. I'm just like anyone else, but there are certain things that I do that make me be able to do those things. And it's really interesting. The whole of this subject kicked off because I was listening to an audiobook called Atomic Habits by an author called James Clear. Fantastic book. And I just thought, you know what, I've realised I've picked up so many things and melded them together, and that's why I'm able to do this. So let me talk you through how I'm able to do so much, because there's kind of 3 different ways that I approach things. In fact, there's 4 technically, but 3 active ways. So the first thing that I do is something called batching. So let's take social media, for example. Let's take Instagram, great example. So I post every day on Instagram on my feed, and I also post on my stories multiple times a day, probably minimum sort of 8 times a day, but can be up to 20 times a day or whatever, depending on what's going on basically. And I had literally one of my best friends who I've known for years and years and years said to me the other day, he was like, how are you doing this? How are you posting like so often? I wake up and you've already posted like an hour before I've woken up. Like, how are you doing this? And I said to him, and this is kind of the key for me, I batch my tasks. So basically what I do is once a month, I will get together all the material that I want to be posting about, and those are pictures, videos, captions, just whatever it is. I sort of look ahead at my diary and sort of see how I want, like what I want to be saying, if it's relevant to what's going on in my life. And then I collate it all, I put it all in a folder, and then I schedule it so that it just kicks off. I don't need to think about it. It takes me about 4 hours to get this stuff together. Now, what I will say is that obviously I've been creating content for a long time, years and years and years and years. So I'm sort of going back and reusing stuff that I've done months, sometimes years ago, but I will post it out. So that's the only thing. If you want to be making new content, then you might want to move on to the second way that I get stuff done, as it were. But yeah, basically that is kind of the crux of how I do my batching. And I don't just do it for social media, but that is the most consistent part of my life that I do batching for sure. So the second thing that I do to get more stuff done is I basically create habits in my life. It's so unsexy, I can't tell you. So there are 3 types of habits that I have in my life that really help me. The first one is kind of just generally having daily or monthly habits. So that I would consider the batching, for instance. That happens once a month. I know that my social media stuff I do in the last week of the month to plan for the following month, just so it's close enough that, you know, things don't change too drastically, because sometimes things change. So yeah, there's general kind of scheduling which kind of helps. And then I also have daily scheduling. So every day I spend an hour doing emails. Every day I spend half an hour playing. Every day I spend an hour doing this sort of stuff for A Drummer's Guide too. So I try and stick to that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect, and I'm always changing up my schedule, and that's partly due to my personality, because I do like variety. It's weird. I'm a dichotomy. I'm a game of 2 halves, because I really enjoy routine. I love it. But at the same time, I really love variety, so I kind of have to bring the variety into the routine, if that makes sense. I'm always fighting against myself, so I'm always changing it up and trying new things, and that is my personality. I'm very much sort of I like testing things and like seeing what works best and what's the best way to do it. So anyway, that's my general scheduling. Now, the other thing that I do, say I want to bring in a new habit, I will do this thing called habit stacking. And again, this is something that James Clear writes about in his book Atomic Habits, where you stack a bunch of behaviours that you want to do. Now, the best way I've found to do this is to take habits that you already have, and then put whatever your new habit that you want to happen, put that in between two things that you already do if you can. So an example of this, of something that I've started recently that is working really well for me, is when I get back from working out, I will jump in the shower, obviously, because I'm sweaty and stinky, and then when I get out, I start my skincare routine. So for those that are interested, I put on my serum, so toner first and then serum. Once the serum is sort of just doing its thing, I spend 10 minutes meditating. So that's my new habit that I've put in recently. And then once that 10 minutes is up, then I carry on the rest of my skincare routine. So it kind of, as long as I feel like I'm getting a benefit, so for instance, that serum is just settling on my physog, that to me is worth it. So I'm like, cool, that's gonna stick. And so far so good. I mean, I'm not saying that it will stick forever, but for now, I'm happy with that. So yeah, habit stacking. And if you already don't have sort of like habit stacks that you do, let's say you're just starting out with this whole concept, things like putting on the kettle to make a coffee, maybe then you can do like a minute of breathing, for instance. Or if you're a drummer and you have a practice pad, maybe you do rudiments for a minute whilst that's happening. So it's just about kind of fitting them into dead time, is what I call it, dead time in my day. I also use it when, for instance, when I'm working, I do the Pomodoro technique, which I've spoken about in another video, where I work for 25 minutes, I take a 5-minute break. In that 5-minute break, sometimes, well, it has been known I've done workouts in those 5 minutes, just like body weight stuff. At the moment, what I'm doing is just going outside into nature and just breathing and closing my eyes, no stimulation, no nothing, and just existing basically, which is very helpful for me because I do enjoy making sure that my brain is always active, which is good in some respects, but it's not great all the time, I've got to admit, and I'm definitely feeling better for it. My energy levels are more sustained. So yeah, it's just about trial and error as well, and just seeing what works for you and what doesn't, because everybody's different and you've got to find what works for you. So the third, and possibly my favourite of the kind of general habits side of things, is called habit bundling or temptation bundling. This is my favourite. It's the one I've done the longest. It works so well for my brain, I can't begin to tell you. So when it started for me was actually the first time I listened to this book, Atomic Habits, which I'm going to hazard a guess was in 2018. Oh no, maybe it was later actually. Maybe it was 2019 or 2020. Anyway, that's irrelevant. The point is that I decided that I wanted to start walking every day. And in theory, in my head, going out walking, lovely nature. Now, yeah, that's great when it's a nice day. Or, when the sun's shining, when I'm feeling good, when I feel like I've got energy. Brilliant. However, as we know, some days you just don't want to be leaving the house. Some days it's pouring with rain, or it's grey and dismal and you feel rubbish, or you're knackered. But I still wanted to do this habit. So what I worked out was, one of my favourite things at the time, and still is listening to audiobooks, and specifically audiobooks that are centered around psychology, peak performance, business principles, marketing, like all those sorts of subjects in varying different ways and in varying different books. I adore. I love learning. I love implementing stuff. It really intrigues me, that kind of scope of a different subject. So I made a rule for myself. I love making rules for myself, where I was only allowed to listen to whatever book I was listening to at the time if I was walking. Now, this habit has changed my life. I can't even tell you. Not only am I out walking, but also I've learned more. There's something about, for me, being in motion and hearing new information. I retain it better. My memory is shocking, generally speaking. But if I'm walking and listening, it's funny, I can remember where I was when I learned a certain concept, or if I'm re-listening to a book, I remember where I was the last time that I heard something that I'm listening to. It's fascinating to me. It's so fascinating to me. And like I said, it was today that I was re-listening to Atomic Habits, and I was like, I need to share this because it's literally the reason that I'm able to do what I do. So another example that I've recently been doing when it comes to that, the sort of habit bundling, if you like, is my morning playing. So if you don't know, every morning for 30 minutes I come into the studio here and I just play. Stream of consciousness, just free play, whatever comes into my head, I go with it. Some days some really interesting stuff comes up, sometimes it's horrendous and I just feel like the worst drummer in the world and I'm all discombobulated and all of that. Now, I knew I wanted to do this thing because basically, again, another thing that I do, when I feel vulnerable in certain aspects of my playing, my inclination these days is to head towards it and basically just fight it. I just want to eliminate it. I don't like feeling vulnerable when it comes to my job at all. I know, I appreciate I get quite vulnerable on this podcast. But when it comes to my job, I want to be strong. I want to be reliable. I want to be able to do what I'm there to do, what I'm paid to do. So anyway, when I was most recently on The Voice Kids, again, an environment that seems to bring out my vulnerability so quickly, I was in that situation and I realised that the thought of just playing with no agenda, with no accompaniment, with no reason, with, no direction, or just nothing to inform what I should be playing, was the scariest thing to me. And the two scariest words I could ever hear are drum solo. Those words would send chills down my spine. It's literally my worst nightmare would be that, being on stage and someone saying drum solo. And it had happened and I hated it and, it is what it is. But I just was like, I'm over this. I'm over feeling like this. I was like, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do this. I'm going to do 30 minutes a day. Anyway, I started doing 30 minutes a day and it was fine. But that was when I was motivated. And then I was like, oh, I'm not really into this. I'm kind of I'm just doing it for myself. It feels very self-centered. What's the point? It's fine. It will be fine. I've gotten this far. All the excuses were coming into my head. But then I thought about this habit bundling thing because I knew that it worked so well for me. So I thought about, okay, how can I make this so much more valuable for me and for other people so that I'm more likely to stick to it? So the other thing is with me, when I'm feeling like I want to tackle something that I'm vulnerable about, I go to extremes. So please bear with me when I say this. I decided the best plan of action would be to live stream when I was doing this 30 minutes of playing, which in my head I just thought, well, it's gonna really normalize me feeling uncomfortable in this scenario very quickly, which, trust me, the beginning, oh my gosh, it was awful. I felt so vulnerable and so rubbish as a drummer, and and then in case that wasn't enough, if there were people in the room, I'd feel awful, in the room as it were, as in on the feed watching the live stream. I'd feel awful, I'd feel like a rubbish drummer, I'd feel like a charlatan, I'd feel like an imposter, all those things. But then there was the other side where if there was no one there, or one person there, I'm like, see, I'm completely rubbish, no one wants to watch this is awful, you're awful. So it was really just this onslaught of horrendousness. So there was that. But the other thing I thought was, if I record this as well, which as you know, if you've followed me for any amount of time, I really am into recording yourself, listening back. I think it's the best way to progress as a musician, in anything actually. If you can have some sort of feedback loop so you can physically see or hear your progress, I think do it. It's life-changing. Anyway, I decided that I was going to do that. I was going to record myself, listen back, and it was going to be just for me. And then I realised, actually, I could turn this into social media content. So again, it's kind of this sort of bringing in all this material and reasons to do something. So that gave me 4 reasons to be doing 30 minutes practice a day. Oh, and then the 5th one was after the live stream, after the playing, I would chat. I'd do a Q&A session with my audience, which I used to do all the time, and I love connecting with people. It's one of my favourite things. It's the reason that I do this podcast. And so I thought, well, that's going to be a really good excuse to do that as well. So I do a Q&A session at the end of every session as well. So yeah, and again, this is about just habit bundling, and it's just giving myself so many reasons to do something that it's absolutely ludicrous not to do it. And then on top of that, I then do habit stacking. So after I do my 30 minutes playing, I do an hour's worth of emails. So yeah, for me, sort of habit formation and sticking to them is such a huge part of why I do what I do and am able to do what I do. And I'm not saying that it's not difficult, and some days are hard, but when you give yourself that way of doing something, it kind of, I don't know, it makes it easier. And like I say, it's not sexy and it's not exciting. Sometimes it's a right dredge. But when you do it, and at the end of a session, and you're like, yes, I did that. And this is a new thing that I've started trying to do, actually, that's really been helping me. I try to really actively say to myself, I am proud of myself for doing that thing, because it is hard to stay consistent. But you know, if you do bring it into your daily life, you can see the progress. In terms of the 30 minutes a day, now I actually really enjoy playing and just being free and just seeing what happens. And before I start working for everyone else, I get to just fall in love with my instrument every day a little bit more, and it just is so precious to me now. It's helped my mental health, it's definitely helped my confidence as a player, and it helps me to connect with other people, which obviously, as you know, I absolutely love. So yeah, so there's that. The final thing that I will say when it comes to getting stuff done, and it probably sounds like the most counterintuitive thing, and it's something that is the hardest thing for me to do, and I will consistently try, because I know it's the right thing on paper. Maybe I need to do some habit stacking with this somehow, or some sort of habit bundling with this, I don't know, is rest. Just rest. Take a day off. Take the day, take the afternoon, whatever you can muster. And like I say, in my day-to-day habits, I'm trying to do this with these 5-minute moments that I just will go outside, I will breathe, I will be in silence and just let myself decompress for a few minutes. I did one literally just before I started filming this because I wanted to get in the right headspace. So yeah, so that's really useful. The other thing is I try to take 1 day off a week at least, 2 if I'm feeling really lucky, and then I'll do things like housework and stuff like that, and that's another good one. So cleaning the house, that's the only other time that I'm allowed to listen to my Audible audiobooks. So either walking or cleaning, basically. I also let myself cook, which if you followed me for any amount of time, you know that I adore food. I love eating it, I love cooking it, I love making new recipes. Speaking of which, I got 2 new cookbooks for my birthday, which was a couple of days ago. Thank you, Charisse, and thank you, Johnny. So one of them is an Ottolenghi book, which is, I think it's called Shelf. It's basically about using stuff in your pantry, which it looks amazing. There's some amazing recipes in there. And then Charisse, for my birthday, got me a Ghanaian cookbook, which I love African food so much. And I just can't wait to start making some recipes from that. Jollof rice, peanut soup, fufu. I'm so excited about all that. Anyway, I don't know why I went on that tangent, but yes, anyway, rest. I think rest, and as I say, rest doesn't mean just necessarily just flopping onto a couch or just lying in bed all day. It can be that if you want. I'm not great at that. I need just a change more than anything. So rather than it being work related, just something else. But you know, it can be not too taxing. I'm a weird person. If I, for instance, if I'm sat watching TV for too long, or like not doing anything for too long, if I'm stagnant, I start feeling really depressed, so I have to get up and move and just do something. So I know that about myself, but you might be different, and that's totally fine. It's all good. So yeah, anyway, that is a little insight into how I get my stuff done. So basically batching is a big one. getting together my habits in various forms, and resting as much as I can, and allowing myself to rest, because there's a lot of guilt that comes up with me around resting. I should be doing stuff, I should be doing more. No, you should be resting and recuperating and making sure that you're okay, so you can then help other people and give stuff to other people. Like, it's counterintuitive not to rest, so please do make sure you rest as well. And I'm kind of preaching to myself when I say that. But anyway, hopefully that has given you some ideas to kind of get going with whatever you're trying to do. And yeah, I'd love to hear it as well. I'd love to hear what you've been up to. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe, share with your friends. I've now set up a Patreon as well, so you can support this podcast in that way. If you go to patreon.com/Emily Drums, you can get exclusive content over there. You can get early access to episodes. I do monthly Q&As, like hangs, basically. We just hang out and chat over Zoom, which is super fun. And it's usually not even about music. It's just generally about all the other stuff that life is about, whatever you're watching on Netflix, or whatever you're been cooking recently, or your favourite whiskey at the moment. That's always a fun subject. But anyway, I hope that you're having a lovely day wherever you are, whatever you're up to. I'm gonna love you and leave you, and I will see you here back next week for another subject. All right, have a good one, guys. Bye bye.
It's almost time to